In the words of Rob Schneider, oh no, we suck again. BYU loses 2 straight. What does it mean for the season? Can they finish with the winning record in conference? Plus, we'll look ahead to West Virginia and Kansas State. That's all coming up on the Loyal Cougars Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Aptive Podcast Studio. This is the Loyal Cougars Podcast. I'm your host, Jake Edmonds, alongside Tosh Mackintosh, where we talk about what you, the fans, are talking about. And you, the fans, are talking a lot about BYU basketball. And so, obviously, we are going to talk a lot about the Cougar men's basketball team today. And Tosh, first of all, how was your Super Bowl weekend?
It was fun. It wasn't the game we expected, but I always like the Super Bowl's a fun time. And Andy Reid being the BYU alum, I went into it wanting to cheer for him, but then I found myself kind of cheering for the underdog at the beginning of the game. And then all of a sudden the Eagles were smashing, and then I'm cheering for the Chiefs to try to make it a game. But anyway, I love the Super Bowl.
So Andy Reid is now 0-1 since listing the Bible, the Book of Mormon, and the Pearl of Great Price.
I loved that, though. I loved that.
I think he's being punished for not adding the Doctrine and Covenants to that list and making it a quad. But I actually thought the Eagles were the better team going in. I don't know what the spread was. I don't know who the favorite was. But I actually texted my brothers. They're big Eagles fans. As soon as the Eagles scored their first touchdown, I said, this game's not going to be close. Like, you could tell from the first couple of possessions. The first 2 Eagles possessions, the first possession where they had that phantom pass interference call, and then the Chiefs just couldn't move the ball after that. And then the Eagles scored their first touchdown. I thought, just from those 3 drives, you could tell the Eagles were going to come away. And
the other BYU connection was that obviously the Chiefs' weakness was their offensive line.
Yeah.
They drafted Kingsley to fix that, and it didn't work out for whatever reason, and so they had to move their guard and put him at left tackle. So they were playing a guard at tackle, and then their second string guard, and their left tackle was just getting bulldozed. And hopefully Kingsley turns out to be the player that we all hope he does. But there is that BYU connection in there that their O-line was bad, and it would have been great if Kingsley could have been out there.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about BYU basketball. We had such a phenomenal week 2 weeks ago, and you weren't on the show, but it was so fun. In fact, you were on the show on Wednesday when BYU beat Baylor. We had kind of this emergency Wednesday show because I really wanted to talk about that game. Had they beaten Arizona, I may have wanted to do it again, but I think first of all, that Arizona game was one of the most entertaining BYU games I think we've seen all season in terms of BYU's ability to punch up. I think the Baylor game, BYU showed what they're capable of. I think Arizona's a much better team than Baylor. And for BYU to go toe-to-toe for all but like 5 minutes of that game, 6 minutes of that game, I think it shows that BYU can kind of hang with the best of the best in the conference. I think even for Arizona's standards, they played out of their minds. Like, they played better than I think they had previously. I think especially, the game before where they kind of pulled it out late against Arizona State. But that Arizona team, especially with Caleb Love, when he's on, and he's, that team's impossible to stop. And for BYU, again, to go toe-to-toe, it shows what they're capable of. I will say, though, that, both the Arizona and the Cincinnati game, BYU's really shown that they don't have a guy like a Caleb Love or like, they don't have a guy that can really take over a basketball game late in crunch time, or when the shot clock's winding down. They don't have a guy that can just break down a defense. And I think, Jizzle James is an example for, a guy that you can just give the ball to. And Jizzle James isn't necessarily an offensive force, but he's a guy that's willing to and capable of breaking down a defense. Caleb Love was the other example. Dallin Hall is probably the closest guy BYU has.
Yeah, if you're looking into the season, you would have said the 3 guys that could have emerged to do that. Dallin Hall was the one that was that in multiple games last year. And then we had Yegor Demon and then Cannon Catchings. Big hype, big time capabilities, have the size, the athleticism. But the second 2 are freshmen, so I'll give them a slight pass. And they've both had their moments, but their moments as a percentage have been pretty small. Like against Arizona, that was my favorite thing about that Arizona game is Yegor was just driving and scoring like we thought he should all year. He kind of turned that off, or Arizona turned that off on him in the end. Catchings had that 1.5 games where he looked like, hey, he could be the player. But I am disappointed in Hall. Like, I feel for the kid, but he has not taken that next step. He hasn't been at all the player that we can just throw the ball to and he gets buckets. And we've seen that. And I think it's one reason we've really had a roller coaster season is that there's tiny flashes of that, but for the most part, we'll go 90% of the time where we just don't have a player we can rely on to get a bucket. Outside of Saunders, Saunders has been the one that's emerged to do that the most, but I think we're asking a lot for Saunders to just all of a sudden be that guy.
Yeah, and I would say Saunders can do it on a closeout, right? I don't feel like Saunders is the guy that can. What I mean by breakdown of defense is I mean isolation basketball. So you're putting the other 4 offensive players in the corner or outside the 3-point line. Maybe you have the guy, you have a big that
maybe
comes
a
out
pick.
and sets a screen.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say Saunders initiates the offense. It's been Dallin and Yegor, right? And Dallin, I think, has shown that he is capable of breaking down a defense, even if there's a screen set for him or whatever. But I'm talking about late game situations.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned Yegor during Arizona, and Yegor had a phenomenal first half against Arizona. I actually talked with a guy that we work with, Brian Swindlehurst, who's obviously he's very well. People who don't know him, he's very well connected to the basketball community. He coaches basketball at the AAU level. He knows a lot of college assistant coaches. I think he
coached in college.
He actually was texting one of the Arizona assistant coaches either during the game or after the game. And he was like, because what was happening was Arizona was not prepared for the action that BYU was running, which was called the Spain action, where Foose or Yegor, they set a high ball screen. Foose or Keita set a high ball screen for Yegor. And then what happens is another guard, Nell or Richie, they'll come and they'll set a back screen on the defender guarding the screener. So if it's Keita or Foose, his defender. So it's almost like this double screen, and you have a team that switches or a team that sags off of that screen, they can't get back in time to defend the hoop. And so Yegor had 3 or 4 open layups because of the Spain action. And I think in the second half, Arizona figured it out. They had apparently practiced against it. They were preparing for it, but for whatever reason, they just were caught off guard. And so, yes, Yegor got his buckets in the first half. Again, I think it was because Arizona just wasn't prepared for it. And again, when you get to these late game situations in crunch time, and especially on the road, they just don't have that guy. And we talked a little bit before the show. To be honest, I don't think they've had a guy like that since Jimmer. And it's, I don't know if that's a hot take or not. It's been 16 years since Jimmer really took over the college football scene. He could break down a defense without a screen, without his teammates doing really anything, but just kind of standing on the side and being ready for a kick out if they needed it. But
there's no arguments Jimmer had that. And it's huge at the end of games. And BYU struggled there. It's also huge at when the other team's on a run and you just need a bucket just to stop the momentum.
Yeah.
That's also when you give it to that guy and let him go to work. And we don't have that either. And I would argue Alex Barcelo had that his junior and senior year, but not to the level of Jimmer. And even then, I know that he's kind of on the verge. It is kind of crazy that BYU has gone that long. There was moments when TJ Haws was that too.
Jake Toulson, I think, was up there. But these are great. By the way, these are fantastic players, right? I thought they're all great shooters. They're all phenomenal guards. But you look at a guy like Jizzle James. You look at a guy like, especially Jizzle James last game. I don't know about Jizzle James the rest of the season. Like, granted, like I said, he's not an offensive force specifically. Like, that's not really what he's known for. Or Cincinnati for that. As an example. But Caleb Love, and VJ Edgecombe for Baylor, like. Every team in the Big 12 seems to have that guy. And BYU is going to be facing some guys this week that are also that guy that can just break down a defense. I did want to talk specifically about Cincinnati because the Cincinnati game to me felt very much like an anomaly. Not necessarily a fluke. I don't want to say it's a fluke because Cincinnati just played lights out, right? They shot better than I think they had all season.
Yeah.
And
they're two guards. They're
exactly.
not good shooters, and they couldn't freaking miss.
Yes. And so, again, this is a podcast where we talk about what the fans are talking about. So Rocky Balboa on Cougar Board said, look, it's simple. If you're going to leave players wide open, you're going to lose. Every single one of Cincy's made shots have been uncontested. And I actually went through 5. So Jizzle James had 6 3-pointers in the game. I went through a condensed replay of the game. For whatever reason, they didn't show one of the 6. But I just want to break down 5 of his 6 3-pointers. So the first one was Mag was defending. He got caught under a screen. Jizzle James gets a wide open look. The second 3-pointer, Mag was sinking a little bit too far to defend a cutter. There was a guy cutting to the basket. He was pretty open. And so Mag sank to help with that cutter and left Jizzle James wide open, again, for his second 3. The third 3-pointer was actually Foose against Foose, switching off on the screen. And Jizzle just made him look silly. Like he faked a drive, took a step back, and scored over him. Number 5 was a zone defense. Hall was actually at the top of the screen. It was, Jizzle was in his zone. Hall followed a cutter to the hoop. So again, he's helping a cutter get to the hoop, left Jizzle James wide open. Jizzle sinks a 3. And then the 6th 3 was Mag again trying to sink. And they actually mentioned in the broadcast, you never want to help off of a ball side shooter, right? Mm-hmm. So if the ball handler is driving, you never want to sink in and help, even if you're reaching in to try and steal it. Like if you leave your defender on a ball side action, it's going to get kicked out to him for a 3. And that's exactly what Mag did. And it resulted in Jizzle James's 6th 3-pointer. Now, I will say early on in the game, I think that was part of the game plan. Again, yeah. Jizzle's not. By the way, do you know what Jizzle's real name is?
No,
it's not Jizzle. Because
I figured.
What would his nickname be, right?
Yeah.
We don't want to talk about it. So, Edgerrin James.
Huh? Really?
Son of Colts running back Edgerrin James.
No way.
Yeah.
I did not.
Why was nobody talking about that during the broadcast?
Yeah.
I feel like people should have
known.
known.
The most intriguing part about him.
So, I think that was the game plan early on. Was like, hey, let's force them to shoot from outside because that's not what they're known for. And so, I think the first couple of 3s, Mag helping off of the screen, or at least going under the screen and getting caught. Him helping off of his off of Jizzle to help defend the cutter. I think those were intentional. But after 3 or 4 3-pointers, you would think that they would start defending the 3. And I will say this too: the other issue that I thought they had was because Jizzle had his 6 3-pointers, and that was huge. They could not defend the step back 2.
Yeah. From
like the free throw line. And it wasn't just Jizzle. It was like 3 or 4 different guards.
Well, Arizona too.
Yeah.
Both those teams killed us with like the 5 to 10 feet away 2s. Just killed us. It seems like BYU's been committed to not giving up layups, and every team tries to defend the 3-pointer. As you just went through, BYU did a bad job of that. But teams are harvesting on us on the 2s. And it's something, it stands out to me too, because our guys don't even take that shot. Like
they'll take floaters. And
yeah.
I've seen Dawson Baker take these kind
We've
of
had games, but especially in Arizona and Cincinnati, it just felt like we were taking 0. I'm not saying we should ever take long 2s. We shouldn't.
Yeah.
But I am fine with short to mid 2s. And we don't ever take them.
Yeah, and I do think that when BYU introduced kind of this floater game, it really opened up the offense. But can I just say, this may be a hot take or not. I think Keita is an overrated defender, like fairly extremely overrated.
He's incredible at help, at defending, at coming over to help and getting the block.
Yeah.
But sometimes he gets burned on that.
Yeah.
Lots of times he gets burned on that, or we give up offensive rebounds because of that.
I think he overcommits. He's too jittery. He's too handsy. He's a bull in a china shop, right, when he's on defense. And sometimes that's helpful. But I think in terms of like actually defending at the rim, there were so many, and I can't name a specific play, but it felt like there were so many plays where the guards just got inside and they weren't fazed at all by who was defending the interior, whether that was Foose or Keita. Now, granted, we know Foose isn't a defender, and so whether he gets a pass or not, that's I think whether or not he gets a pass is determined by how well he plays on offense.
Correct. He's out there for that.
And I think this year Foose has taken a massive step back to where I think his offensive ability is not strong enough for him to really be on the floor. But that's kind of a different discussion, and we can talk about alternatives in a later segment. But I was not impressed with BYU's ability to defend the interior. Granted, we're talking about Jizzle James and shooting 6 of 8 from 3, and they actually went 6 of 12 from 3 in the first half. And I tweeted after in the first half, at halftime, I said, because BYU's winning, BYU's up at halftime despite Cincinnati going 6 of 12, and I said there's going to be a regression to the mean, and when there is if BYU can, because I don't think BYU shooting necessarily lights out. They were 5 of 10 from 3, but they're a good 3-point shooting team. And so I thought if BYU can just play their game, Cincinnati's going to regress. They're going to come back to who they are offensively. And I thought BYU would be the team to pull away, similar to what they did in Provo. Cincinnati then goes 4 of 8 from 3 in the second half. So yes, they defended the three poorly. But I haven't really been impressed with Keita's ability to defend the interior. And I'm not saying he's a bad defender. I just think that people think he's Rudy Gobert. They almost treat him like he's Rudy Gobert. He can rebound among the best. He's not a great rebounder. I actually don't think he's a great rebounder. He's not a great shot blocker. He's capable of it. He's athletic. He can jump out of the gym. I don't think, I think there's another element to that, which is understanding when to block shots and how to block shots. Yeah. And I don't think he's at that point yet.
Well, I think his capabilities of all those things are incredible. He's a very capable shot blocker. He's a very capable rebounder. But I think that his basketball instincts on when to stay with his guy and box out and when to go for those blocks, they're getting better, but there's still a lot of room for improvement, and that he's out there for that.
Yeah.
To catch lobs and to rebound and defend. Like, that is what he's out there for. So he's got to be well above average on those to help the team.
Yeah. And we talk a lot about the guards. I think the interior, it's really unfortunate that we can't have Keita and Foose in the same body, because they're just, one is such a liability on the other side, and it's such a bad liability that I don't think they really make up for it on the side that they're good at. So Keita, I don't think he makes up for it on defense, his lack of ability on offense, and I don't think Foose makes up for his lack of ability on defense on the offensive side.
Yep.
Speaking of rebounds, this was wild to me. Second chance points, specifically, so offensive rebounds leading to 2 buckets. ATL Coup 2088 on Cougar Board said, "Yikes! Cincinnati only missed 24 shots all game, and they got offensive rebounds on 11 of those 24 misses. Almost half of their missed shots still ended up in another possession that led to a score." And BYU just finished with 17 total rebounds. For context, when BYU played Queens, and they beat them by like 50, right? Queens, North Carolina, Queens. Queens had 22 rebounds against BYU in November. That's Queens against BYU. And so for BYU to come away with just 17 rebounds, like, that says a lot about their inability to rebound the ball. And it's not like BYU, granted, Cincinnati made a lot of shots, and so it's hard to rebound, make shots. But BYU missed their own shots, and they had 3 offensive rebounds for 0 points. Cincinnati had 11 for 16.
Yeah. No, that's multiple games in a row where the other team has killed us on the offensive boards. And it just feels like every time they get an offensive board, they throw it out to a 3-point shooter and he makes it. Mm-hmm. It's like, as soon as they get that offensive rebound, man, we're going to give up 3 points.
It's as bad as a turnover.
Yeah.
In fact, I would even say it's worse, because it's a turnover on their offensive side of the floor, which, as you said, results typically in a kick out or a tip in.
And BYU's been a great rebounding team until these last 2 games. So is it an anomaly, or have teams started to figure out some of BYU's tendencies and then how to really take advantage of those? Like, that's what we're going to find out.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll see if they can turn it around. The other thing I thought was very interesting, and I think this was probably the biggest storyline, at least of the second half, was Kevin Young just hockey lineup changed his lineup on the floor.
Yeah. Well, we were up at half, and then to come out in the second half, next thing we know, we're down 12, I think, and
like
it's
a 22-2 run, I think.
Yeah.
So at 12:47 left in the second half, Cincinnati goes up 17. Kevin Young then subs out Richie, Yegor, Foose. He subs in Trey, Boskovic, and Cannon. Dallin and Dawson were already on the floor. BYU then cut the lead to 8 with that lineup. And I don't know if that's just because they're fresh legs, if they're obviously highly motivated. But Trey Young, I thought Trey Stewart played really. Trey Young. I wish we had Trey Young. Trey Stewart played really well, I think, in those minutes. I was really impressed with Boskovic. And that's now 2 games where I think Boskovic coming in at a time where he's, typically not expected to come in. I think Colorado was the other game where he came in and gave BYU really good minutes at the 5. And, I wouldn't expect him to come in and be a great defender like Keita. I don't expect him to come in and post up like Foose. But he adds, I think, a different element that BYU desperately needed, at least at that point in the game. And that's the pick and pop.
Correct. His shooting gives spacing on that pick and roll.
Yeah.
Like, he can float out, and it opens lanes up for guards. It changes everything, because what I liked about that lineup we were playing is we had 5 guys on the floor that could shoot.
Yeah.
The problem BYU's gone to a lot this year is they'll have only 3 guys. The NBA and now college, it's very hard to play basketball if you have 2 guys out there that can't shoot. And BYU's done that a lot of the year. I think we're playing our talents, and 2 of them can't shoot. But I'm with you. I would love to see the Boskovic at 5 lineup more, so we can at least get a lot more lineups where we have 4 or 5 guys out there that can shoot.
Yeah, I think it would be beneficial for BYU to at least experiment a little bit more with Boskovic in the lineup, especially when they need those 3-point shots. But I think it starts this week with West Virginia, and the question that's been on a lot of BYU fans' minds is, with those 2 losses, and granted this is probably an overreaction, but could BYU actually finish with a losing record in conference? We're going to talk about that, and also we'll talk about does Kevin Young deserve a pass for this season? That's all coming up on the Loyal Cougars podcast. This episode is brought to you by Aptiv. Aptiv believes that every home should be enjoyed. They tailor their pest control treatment plans to target pests when and where they're most active. Plus, if you see pest activity between treatments, Aptiv will return to take care of the problem at no additional cost. It's their way of making sure every customer is satisfied and every pest is controlled. If pests stay away, Aptiv is why. Visit goaptiv.com/loyalcougars or call 844-966-4787 and mention this promotion to get your initial treatment for just $29. That's goaptiv.com/loyalcougars or call 844-966-4787. Get home field advantage with Aptiv. Why should you have to choose between style and repping your team? Wooden Grail is bridging the gap between modern fashion and college fandom. Their hats and apparel are made with premium materials like suede and corduroy, featuring bold, unique designs that let you show off your team pride without sacrificing your look. Whether you're at the game or out on the town, Wooden Grail lets you do both. Check them out at woodengrail.com and step up your fan game. Use code CougarBoard for free shipping on any order. All right, so BYU lost 2 in a row, and so I think fans are being fans and overreacting, and that's fine. But the question that was brought up on Cougar Board, Cyclone Coug said, "I'm a little scared, guys. BYU has played 5 of their 10 hardest games in conference so far. They're 1-4 in those. We only have 3 of our 10 easiest games left. Assuming chalk, we go 1-4 in our next 5 hardest, and 2-1 in our next 3 easiest. So that would be a 9-11 finish." I'm not that down on BYU. Let's actually just take a look at BYU's remaining schedule real quick. So this week they have at West Virginia and then home against Kansas State. I put at West Virginia as a toss-up. Although I think I'm leaning more towards a loss because of how they've played on the road.
Yeah, we've only won 2 road games all season.
Yes. So, and West Virginia's not a bunch of scrubs, right? I think West Virginia's a pretty solid team. Now we'll talk about a little bit more about West Virginia in the next segment, but they are missing a key player that was announced that he's now out for the rest of the season. We'll talk about that. For now, it's a toss-up. I think it could be a loss. Kansas State at home, I think, is a win. Kansas on the road, or Kansas at home, I actually have as a toss-up.
Which is pretty kind of you.
Because, honestly, dude, I think BYU is a completely different team at home than they are on the road.
Yeah.
And Kansas has already proven that they are capable of losing on the road. They lost at Kansas State. Does that say more about Kansas State or does it say more about Kansas? I guess we'll kind of see this week, right? If Kansas State is actually a formidable team.
The Marriott Center will be rocking for that Kansas game,
honestly,
too.
I think any game in the Marriott Center can be a toss-up.
Yeah.
So I'm leaving that as a toss-up, but that could be a loss. Arizona on the road, I think, is a lock loss, to be honest.
It'd be shocking.
Absolutely. Arizona State on the road, I think it's a win. But again, they're on the road, so who knows? West Virginia at home, I have as a win. That could be a toss-up, but I have as a win because it's at home. Iowa State on the road, I think, is a loss. And then Utah at home better be a win. So in there, I have 2 losses, 2 toss-ups, and 4 wins. They're 6-5. So really, all they need is 4 wins. So if they win the games they should, Kansas State, Arizona State on the road, Utah at home, and then one of the rest of the games. I have West Virginia at home. They'll finish with a 500 Big 12 record. And then if they can pull a couple wins out in the conference tournament, I think they're still kind of on the bubble. They could enter the NCAA tournament as a 12 seed and have a play-in game and make a run. Like, who knows? But I think 9-11 feels a little bit too pessimistic to me.
I could see how it could happen. I mean, that Cougar Board post really laid it out, how we got some tough games coming up. At the same time, BYU, although they don't have a go-to player, they play collectively, they rely on the 3-ball, and that formula over the last decade, every year we've beat some teams we have no business beating. And, number 1, Gonzaga on the road. And I feel like we haven't had that game yet this year, and I think we're going to. Whether I would have thought Kansas, but that's at home. But again, if we go on the road and beat Arizona on the road, all of a sudden we're in a good spot. I just look at we got to beat, because of these last 2 losses that we should have got at least one of them. Now we're in a spot we have to shock the world in at least one game, in my opinion.
The good news is there's a lot of meat on the bone still, right? Like, it's like, yes, you can look at their record 6-5 in conference and say like, they're just not playing well. Like it's pretty much out of reach, right? But like, it's not. There's so many like West Virginia is a good example this week on the road. That's a Q1 game. Like, it's another Q1 opportunity. They've now had Arizona, Baylor. Like, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, they've now had like 3 or 4 Q1 opportunities. And I think they've done well. Cincinnati would have been another one, right? But I think it's actually been and granted, like, it's a challenging schedule. I think a lot of people are feeling it's pretty daunting. But I look at it as like there's still a lot of opportunity to, get back on the bubble, to even, start talking about seeding. Like, if they can pull away one of these wins,
it has a lot of weight.
It has a ton of weight. And honestly, at West Virginia is massive, and Kansas at home. If you win those games, one of those games, I think you're still in the discussion, pretty easily in the discussion for a tournament bid. That said, with what we've seen so far with this BYU team, and there's been a lot of ups and downs, a massive roller coaster season, how would you assess Kevin Young and his ability to coach at the college level with the talent that he's had so far this season? Does he deserve a pass? And granted, this isn't a failure of a season by any stretch of the imagination, but I think as far as expectations coming in, whether that's set by the fans or whether that's set by the team, I don't feel like they've been met yet. But is that Kevin Young's fault? Is it just new system, new players? Like, how much of a pass do you give Kevin?
To me, it's a to be continued on how he's doing, because there's 2 things that you need out of a college coach. one is the lifeblood of the program is recruiting, and he is knocking it out of the park unlike we have ever experienced. And so that is why I give him a pass, is that because he's got people coming in, let's see how that develops and turns out. The second, though, is that you've got to win some games by X's and O's and scheming. Has he done that at times this year? Yes. But if I'm being fair, I think it's been the opposite of that more, where he's kind of got a little bit out-coached in several of these games. I think just him learning the college game and how it's called and the personnel and what you can do and what you can't. To me, he's getting a B- in the scheme so far, but he's getting an A in the recruiting. And so overall, that recruiting thing, it's like, let's give this time. Let's let him cook. Let's see where this goes.
Yeah. I think it's taken him a long time to figure out lineups. And I talked with Jonathan Tavernari last week about this, and he felt pretty confident that Kevin Young had his rotation set. And honestly, I thought so too. They had won 2 in a row. They were 2 pretty good wins. But then it seems like he's kind of blown it up again, especially against Cincinnati, where we saw, that lineup that we talked about last segment come in just as like this experiment, just to like throw in somebody to give him a spark. My question, and I have some questions about very specific things that have happened in games. And I'll give you an example. Against Arizona, when BYU was trading punches with them, they went on that scoring drought late. Arizona didn't go on a scoring drought. Obviously, they were scoring pretty much every possession down the floor, and Caleb Love was a big part of that. What I did not love and what I questioned was Kevin Young's decision to switch 1 through 5. So there were periods of time where Keita was guarding Love or other guards. And Keita is not a perimeter defender. He looks completely lost any farther away than 5 feet from the hoop on offense and defense. But I'm talking about defensively specific. And he did that for like 4 or 5 possessions, and every time down the floor it hurt BYU. And I'm like, when are we going to stop switching 1 through 5? Like, we haven't done this really all season. We've run the zone. I think the zone is actually, and as much as I dislike the zone, I think that's more effective than putting Keita on a guard and switching him off on guards that are capable of shooting from the perimeter. So I questioned that. The other thing I questioned was Kevin Young did not call a timeout, I don't think really at all during that 22-2 run.
That's what I was going to point out, is that he doesn't stop the bleeding.
Yeah.
He lets his guys play, and maybe players can appreciate that. But on the inverse, when he calls timeouts, he does incredible set plays.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like we score out of timeouts almost every time. So when they're on a run, freaking call a timeout. Mm-hmm. Like, let's get these guys' heads right and draw up a play to stop the bleeding.
Yeah. In fact, it was Dawson Baker that hit the 3 out of the timeout to cut it to like 14. I think they were up 17. And then I think Dawson hit a 3 the very next play. But it's like, what? Yeah, it's just too late at that point, right? Like, so I think he's still adjusting. Like, there's definitely an adjustment period. College basketball is way different than the NBA. And so the question, though, then becomes like, how long is long enough? Like, at what point does the system no longer become new? At what point are you adjusted to college? Does he have to go a full year? Like, I think, we're 4 weeks away from the end of the season. Like, I feel like he should have most of the ins and outs of college basketball, but maybe not. The other thing, too, is I think he's giving his freshmen a massive green light. And I guess Yegor specifically, because Catchings, I think he's kind of pulled the leash back a little bit. But I don't agree with Yegor being the primary ball handler in crunch time specifically. We've shown that he turns the ball over. He takes bad shots. Like, his court vision's fantastic, and I'm not taking that away from him. I still think he has the potential to be an NBA talent. But as a freshman in crunch time situations, when you need a bucket, and we've talked about this already, he's not the guy I would go to. And I question Kevin Young's, he's almost just like trying to give Yegor as many chances as possible, knowing that he's going to be in the NBA. Like, it's almost like a teaching moment, but like at the expense of a win. I don't know if I like that decision.
Yeah, Yegor shoots too many guarded step-back threes, and that's not his game.
Yeah.
And he does seem like he just lets Yegor do that. I'm thinking, though, maybe he's playing the long game in recruiting, that he just wants to show these guys, look, I will give you a leash. I will let you play.
Sure. And that's, again, I agree with you. I think that's probably the reason, because I think Kevin Young is smart enough to realize that, like, Yegor's not that guy yet. Like, he can be at some point when he's 18, right? I think at some point he can be, but he's not. And again, like you said, it's not that he's just missing, like, kick out wide open 3-point shots. Like, he's dribbling into contested 3-pointers early in the shot clock. There's just like, it's just, it's very freshman mistakes. And he's given him such a long leash. Yegor leads the team in 3-point attempts in 3 of the last 4 games.
Which is crazy.
Think of all the 3-point shooters BYU has.
Yeah.
Trevin Nell, Richie Saunders. I would even say Dawson Baker. I would prefer him to shoot threes.
Yes.
I would even say Dallin Hall.
Correct. Catchings, too. I was going to
say catchings, but like...
Well, over Yegor. Like,
sure.
I love me some Yegor, but... his weakness is 3-point shooting. He should not ever be our leading 3-point shooter from volume.
Yes. So I don't know if I'm fine giving him a pass just because it was so early on. Like, it's his first year. I'm happy to give a coach a pass for an entire year. But again, this team had at least tournament aspirations, and if they fail to meet those, it at least forces me to take a step back in terms of expectations for next year. Because, yes, we bring in AJ Debonsa. Yes, Yegor may come back. Who knows? But, like, I have yet to see Kevin Young's ability to turn a team full of talent into a tournament team. And until I see that, like, I'm still kind of hesitant to say, he's the best coach that BYU's ever had or whatever. Like, he's not really meeting expectations. But I'm happy to give him a pass this year. That said, is BYU becoming incredibly easy to game plan for? And I'll caveat this by saying this comes from a post from Seattle BYU fan on Cougar Board. He says BYU is easy to game plan against. And these are his steps to game plan for him. Face guard Nell and Richie. Stop Yegor attacking the rim. Give him 15 to 20 open looks. Let them get it to the post to Foose and Keita. Then double team. They can't hold on to the ball. You need to stop transition points and force their half court game. Ball game is what he says. I have a couple issues with that. By the way, I think it's incredible to say BYU is. I guess it's incredibly naive to say BYU is easy to defend when BYU has one of the best offenses in the country
and a winning record in the Big 12.
Like, have they had like scoring droughts? Absolutely, but I think every college basketball team does and has. Here's a couple of issues I have with this post. Keita does not post up. So why would you double team Keita in the post if he's not posting up? I will say he struggles with pressure, like when he takes a ball at the perimeter. He's trying to do a dribble handoff or hand off to a teammate. Cincinnati did a really good job of pressuring him, even at the 3-point line, and he struggled with that. And then Foose has historically been automatic in the post. So, like, yeah, you can double him, but like last year at least he was scoring anyway. He mentioned stopping transition. If that's like saying, if we just force them to miss their 3-pointers, we'll win games. Or if we shoot the 50% from 3, we'll win games. Like, yeah, obviously, but like, how are you going to do that? How are you going to stop BYU from scoring in transition? Like, that's the strategy of every team against every opponent, is like, how do you stop transition buckets? It's way easier said than done. Like I said, BYU is 5th in scoring in conference play. They lead the conference in field goal percentage, despite not having that inside presence. And they're 2nd in the conference in 3-point percentage. So, like, this whole idea that like BYU is a super easy team to guard, they're still one of the best shooting offenses, despite not having an inside presence in the conference.
That's just frustrated fans talking, and
totally.
I relate to that.
Totally.
But at the same time, like, do we have weaknesses in our players that coaches can scheme towards? Yes, but every team does.
Yeah.
And so it is this game of chess of hiding our weaknesses, exposing theirs, and even kind of going back to the Kevin Young thing. What really matters is going to be the conference tournament and getting into and doing something in March Madness. And if we lose to Cincy and Arizona and head-scratching loss to Providence, none of that matters. If he wins a few games that he shouldn't have won, even in the conference tournament, because then that gets us into March Madness.
Yep, and that's going to start this week against a West Virginia team that I think, at least in the first few weeks of the season, I thought they were going to be one of the top 3 teams in the conference. They've since taken a step back, and we're going to talk about kind of reasons why. We'll also break down West Virginia and Kansas State coming up on Saturday. That's all coming up next on the Loyal Cougars Podcast. Looking to get your brand in front of BYU's most engaged fans? The Loyal Cougars Podcast and Cougar Board are your perfect match. Cougar Board is the largest online community of BYU fans with thousands of posts every day. The Loyal Cougars Podcast is the official podcast of Cougar Board, and we have sponsorship opportunities available both for the podcast and the site. Contact us at sponsorships@loyalcougars.com, and we'll help your message hit home with the Cougar faithful. Again, that's sponsorships@loyalcougars.com. So a pretty important week this week for BYU. Another Q1 opportunity at West Virginia. The Mountaineers are 38 net ranking. It's
really good.
That's Q1, right? I mean, that would be Q1 on a neutral floor, but they're on the road. And so if they win that, that's another quad 1 win. West Virginia, and I think BYU struggles with these types of teams, is a defensive specialty team. So they're going to break you down defensively. They allow just 63 points per game. And they're actually best in the Big 12 at not allowing you to shoot the 3. And then when you do, they typically don't allow their opponents to make it. So they're essentially defending the perimeter really well this season, at least in conference play. And that's BYU's specialty. Cincinnati, by the way, was also really good at that. And BYU, at least in Provo, shut that down. Like they shot really well from 3 anyway. So can they do that on the road at West Virginia? We'll see. They also average 8 steals a game. So that's a very active defense, right? And again, I think BYU struggles with that. Now, West Virginia is not a fantastic offensive team. They lost one of their best offensive players in fact, it was an injury I think he sustained, Tucker DeVries.
Yeah.
It's an injury he sustained, I think, last year. He just had season-ending surgery on it last week.
Probably their best player.
Yeah, absolutely. At least their best offensive player. And so now they haven't had him since their 8. I think he played 12 games, 8 or 12 games. He hasn't played since December. So and I think that's a big part of why West Virginia's kind of taken a step back. So they're actually 6-2 with him. So he played 8 games. They're 6-2 with him. They've lost 4 of their last 6. They're 9-6 without him. And so he adds that kind of calming presence on offense that I think every team wants and every team needs. And so without him, I think West Virginia does take a step back. They are still a fantastic defensive team. And so BYU is going to have to really take care of the ball because it doesn't matter how bad you are offensively. If you can force turnovers and force transition buckets, you're going to win games. And so I think BYU needs to take care of the basketball. A big part of their offensive identity and honestly defensive identity as well with Tucker DeVries gone is Javon Small. And Javon is actually a projected second-round pick in the draft. Here's what NBA Draft Room says about him. He's a tough, hard-nosed guard with a well-rounded game and good lead guard skills. Is a steady hand running the point and shows a nice balance of playmaking and scoring. And I looked at some of Javon's game film, especially their win against Iowa State. And he is the type of point guard that BYU has struggled against, which is kind of these shorter, shiftier ball handler, not specifically a scorer, but in terms of shooting, not a fantastic shooter, but he finds his teammates. 5.8 assists a game. He actually is ahead of Yegor in terms of total assists a game. So I think he's going to be a menace against BYU. Yeah,
and the thing that's scary is that who Yegor and our guards have struggled against are these really pesky, aggressive defenders. Our shooters need space, and they don't really create space by themselves. And then Yegor, the guys that have given him struggles he's just not strong yet. And when he's playing against someone who's up in his business and is stronger than him, it's been tough for him.
Yeah, as we know, he's not a guy that can put the ball on a string and handle it. Like he's very much.
It's hard when you're a 6'9" point guard.
Absolutely, he's long, and like I think there are advantages to that. Like he can defend shorter guards as long as they don't get past him, right? But yeah, he's not a ball handler. He turns the ball over a lot, and this is Javon Small is the type of guard that can take advantage of that on defense. And then I don't know who's going to guard him. Mag will probably guard him. But if they switch off, then Richie can guard him, I think. But, like, I wouldn't put Yegor on him. You need it. Dallon's also a pretty underrated defender at guard. But fans are going to see, like, Javon Small is a quick ball handler that can put the ball on a string. And, they're really going to have to focus on him. Because, honestly, outside of him, there's not really much else. Like he is the facilitator. He is their Caleb Love. And now, granted, Arizona has a lot more ballers on their team than West Virginia.
And he can go off in big games. I mean,
yeah.
he scored 31 against Gonzaga. Yeah. And so, like, he's somebody that absolutely BYU, it's number one key to the game is they got to stop him.
Yep. And so I think that'll set the tone for this week. And then they go back home to Provo to play Kansas State. And Kansas State, granted, they're towards the bottom of the Big 12, but they beat a Kansas team that's one of the best in the conference, and so they're capable. What Kansas State does well is they distribute the ball, so they're very much a score by committee type of team. They've got 5 guys averaging double figures, specifically Coleman Hawkins, who is a projected second rounder. He's going to be a tough. Now he's not a defender like a Javon Small because he's a forward. But he's going to give our bigs fits. He's going to give BYU's. He's going to give Foose and Keita fits. He can also defend Yegor. He can really defend the whole floor. Like he can defend anyone except for maybe like Dallon. Dallon might be able to break him down. But like he's a very versatile guard. He's 7th in steals in the Big 12. He's also the team's leading scorer. Outside of him, you've got Brendan Housen, who's a 3-point specialist, and then Doug McDaniel. And Doug McDaniel is very much like Javon Small, where he's kind of the shorter, agile. I saw a play where he was driving. He put the ball like between his legs, between like 2 defenders, almost like what LeBron James did that one time where he like went between his legs from behind to dribble through defenders and get to the hoop. So he's not a phenomenal shooter, right? He's going to get to the hoop with his ball handling skills, but he's a distributor, and he's another one of those guys that can break you down on offense off the dribble. And again, I think you probably put Mag on him, but this is very much a score by committee team. Other than that, they're pretty average defending. They're pretty average on offense. But as we saw against Kansas, they are capable of showing up, especially at home in big games.
Yeah, we could lose to both these teams. This week is huge. It's getting to crunch time of the season, where if we go 0-2 this week, then our season of turning into something great is over.
Yeah.
If we go 1-1, we're in the same spot, and it's like, okay, we can live with that. We're going to have to win a game we're not supposed to win. If we go 2-0 this week, then we're sitting pretty again. And we're really in the draft. We needed 4 wins, and we got 2 of them.
Yeah.
And so then we're feeling real good.
I think I'm okay with going 1-1 for the rest of the year. Every week for the rest of the year.
Yeah, it keeps
depending
us
on who they win, who they beat, right?
But yeah, no, 1-1 keeps you alive. We can't go 0-2.
Yeah. In any week, the rest of the year. All right, so that's breaking down West Virginia and Kansas State this week. It's going to be interesting to watch. I think we're getting to a point where BYU really needs to start tightening up and figuring things out, and that all starts with West Virginia this week. Tosh, thank you for joining me, as always. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
If you like what you watched or listened to today, please like and subscribe to the podcast. We're on YouTube, we're on Apple, we're on Spotify. Everywhere you find your podcasts, you can find us. Please like and subscribe and follow us on social media. But for now, this is the Loyal Cougars Podcast. I'm your host, Jake Edmonds. That's Tosh Mackintosh. See you next week.